The rain had been falling since morning, soft at first but now turning heavy, drumming against the roof of every passing car. The sky was a dull gray, and the air smelled of wet earth and gasoline. On a quiet stretch of road just outside town, a woman stood beside her car, holding a small umbrella that wasn't doing much to keep her dry. Her name was Lena, and this wasn't how she had imagined her afternoon going. She was supposed to be at an important meeting an hour ago. Her phone battery was low, the road was almost empty, and every car that passed sent waves of water splashing toward her. The hood of her small silver car was open, steam rising faintly from the engine. She had tried turning the key again and again, but it refused to start. Lena had always considered herself independent. She wasn't the kind to panic over a flat tire or a stalled engine, but this time felt different. The rain, the silence, and the ticking clock made her chest feel tight. She looked around, hoping someone might stop, but most cars just sped by, their wipers slicing across windshields like metronomes, keeping time with her growing frustration. After another 20 minutes, when her umbrella had started to bend backward in the wind, a white pickup truck finally slowed down and stopped a few feet ahead of her. For a second, Lena hesitated. She'd heard stories. It wasn't always safe to accept help from strangers. But then a man stepped out of the truck. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, with damp hair sticking to his forehead, and a jacket already soaked at the shoulders. He didn't say anything right away. He just gave a small nod and walked toward her with a calm look that somehow made her feel less nervous. "Looks like trouble," he said, glancing at the car's open hood. Lena gave a tired smile. "Yeah, it died on me about half an hour ago. I tried calling for help, but no one's picking up." He set down a small metal toolbox he'd been carrying and leaned over the engine. "Mind if I take a look?" She shook her head. "Please. Be my guest." He didn't waste time with small talk. His hands moved with quiet focus, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Lena watched as he checked the battery, wiped some oil with a rag, and tapped a few things with the handle of a wrench. There was something oddly reassuring about the way he worked. No rush, no frustration, just steady movements in the middle of the rain. "You were heading somewhere important?" he asked after a minute, still looking under the hood. "Yeah," she said, hugging her arms for warmth. "A meeting downtown. I was supposed to be there at 2. He smiled faintly. "Well, looks like your car had other plans." That small bit of humor made her laugh even though she was soaked and miserable. The sound of her own laughter surprised her. It had been a while since she'd laughed at something that simple. After a few more minutes, the man stepped back. "Try starting it now," he said. Lena got in, turned the key, and the engine roared to life like it had just woken from a deep sleep. She couldn't help the sigh of relief that left her lips. She rolled the window down as he wiped his hands on a cloth. "You're a lifesaver," she said. "I don't even know your name." "Ryan," he said simply. "I've got a small garage just outside town. Lucky I keep tools with me." "Well, Ryan, I owe you one," she said. "Seriously, thank you," he shrugged. "You don't owe me anything. Just glad to help." When he spoke, it wasn't in a rehearsed or proud tone. It was honest, almost shy. Lena noticed that. He wasn't the kind of man who did things for attention. He just saw someone in need and stopped. The rain began to slow down, falling softer now. Ryan took a small step back as Lena climbed out again, closing the car's hood. She noticed his jacket had patches of grease and water, his shoes caked in mud. Yet he didn't seem to care. "Let me at least pay you for your time," she said, pulling her purse from the car. He shook his head right away. "No need for that. Come on," she insisted. "It's the least I can do." He smiled, that quiet kind of smile people give when they mean what they say but don't want to make a big deal about it. "If I took money every time I helped someone on the road, it wouldn't be helping anymore. It'd just be business." "Keep it." She didn't know what to say to that. His words were simple, but they stuck with her. As he started walking back to his truck, Lena called out, "Wait!" He turned around. "Can I at least give you a ride somewhere?" "You're soaked," he chuckled lightly. "Appreciate it, but my truck's right there. Besides, I'm used to getting a little wet." "Comes with the job." She smiled again, watching as he opened the driver's door of his truck. Just before he got in, he looked back and said, "You take care now. Drive slow till you get that car checked properly. It might be a bad cable." "I will," she promised. "Thank you again." When he waved goodbye and drove off, she stood for a moment under the soft drizzle, watching the taillights fade into the distance. Something about the whole encounter stayed in her chest like a small, unexplainable warmth. She didn't know him. Not really. But she felt like she'd just met someone different from most people she knew. Later that night, when she finally got home and changed out of her wet clothes, she found herself thinking about that short meeting more than she expected to, the way he worked without showing off, the way he didn't try to flirt or make her uncomfortable. Just quiet kindness. That was rare. The next day, Lena mentioned it to her friend at work while they waited for coffee. "So you're telling me some random guy stopped to help you, fixed your car, and didn't even take money?" her friend asked. "That's right." Her friend raised an eyebrow. Either he's too good to be true or he's secretly a saint. Lena smiled. "Maybe just someone who still believes in helping others." Her friend laughed. "That's a nice thought. Just be careful. You never know with people these days." "I know," Lena said. But he seemed genuine, and that was all she could say. Genuine. That one word fit perfectly. A few days passed, but she kept replaying the memory of how he had leaned over the engine, rain dripping from his jacket, completely focused on helping. There had been no awkwardness, no pressure, just quiet understanding between two strangers on a rainy road. She didn't expect to ever see him again. He'd gone his way, she'd gone hers. That was life. People cross paths for moments and then disappear again. Still, something about that afternoon had changed how she looked at people. It reminded her that kindness still existed in small, unnoticed ways. Sometimes when she drove the same road again, she caught herself glancing around, half hoping to spot that white truck. Weeks went by. Life moved forward. The meeting she had missed that day turned out fine in the end, and her car seemed to be running better after a proper check at the repair shop. But the memory of that rainy day refused to fade. One evening, as she sat by the window of her apartment, watching the city lights reflect on the wet streets below, she smiled to herself. She wondered if Ryan ever thought about that moment too. Maybe he didn't. Maybe to him it was just another good deed done in passing. But for her, it was something more. It had reminded her that not every connection in life needs to be dramatic or planned. Sometimes it begins in the quietest ways, like someone stopping to help when no one else would. And deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths weren't finished crossing yet. 2 weeks had passed since the day on that rainy road. Yet Lena still thought about the man who had helped her. Every now and then, while driving, she would catch herself glancing in her side mirror, half hoping to see that old white truck again. She didn't know why it lingered in her thoughts. Maybe because moments like that didn't happen often anymore, when someone stopped simply to help without expecting anything in return. Her work life kept her busy. She worked as an event planner, always surrounded by noise and meetings, phone calls, endless coffee cups, and deadlines. But even in the middle of all that, her mind would sometimes drift back to that short moment under the rain, the sound of his calm voice, the way he had smiled as if kindness was just part of who he was. It was a Thursday afternoon when her company hosted a local community fair to promote small businesses. They had invited local shops, food stalls, artists, and service providers from nearby towns. Lena was in charge of organizing the layout, checking that every stall had its banners and supplies in place. It was a long day, the kind where your feet ache before noon. As she walked between the rows of booths, clipboard in hand, she caught the sound of tools clinking. A small repair stand had been set up near the edge of the parking lot, a local garage offering free car checkups for visitors. Curious, she walked closer to make sure they had everything they needed, and that's when she saw him. He was wearing the same brown jacket, sleeves rolled up, talking to an older man about a loose belt under the hood of a car. She stopped walking for a second. It was like the world slowed down just enough for her to take it in. She hadn't expected to ever see him again, yet here he was, calm, focused, exactly as she remembered. When he looked up, their eyes met. For a moment, they both just stared, surprised but smiling. He wiped his hands with a rag and walked toward her. "I know you," he said, smiling softly. "Rainy road, broken car," Lena laughed. "I was hoping I'd run into you again, though not literally this time." He chuckled. "Good to see you again, Lena." She blinked. "Wait, how do you remember my name?" "You mentioned it when you were calling someone from work," he said. "I guess I just remembered." There was something genuine in the way he said it. No hidden meaning, no awkward pause, just the truth. She glanced at the sign behind him. So this is your garage? Yeah, he nodded. Small place on the edge of town. We do basic repairs, nothing fancy. The fair invited us to give free checkups, so I thought, why not? Lena smiled. That's really kind of you. He shrugged lightly. People drive old cars in this area. Sometimes they just need someone to tell them what's wrong before it turns into something worse. For a moment, she forgot about her clipboard and her long list of tasks. They stood there talking about cars, weather, and how unpredictable the last few weeks had been. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just an easy flow of words that made time pass unnoticed. At one point she said, "You know, you never let me thank you properly for helping that day." He shook his head. "You already did. You drove off safe. That's enough," she laughed. "You really don't like being appreciated, do you?" He smiled, looking down shyly. "Guess I'm just not used to it." Later, when her coworkers came by to check on her, she excused herself and promised Ryan she'd come back to see him before the event ended. She spent the rest of the day distracted, sneaking glances toward his booth every now and then. He was always busy helping someone, tightening bolts, explaining something patiently, smiling politely when people thanked him. When evening came and most of the crowd had started leaving, Lena finally walked back toward his stand. The fair lights glowed softly against the darkening sky, and the smell of food hung in the cool air. Ryan was packing up his tools. "Looks like you had a long day," she said. "Yeah," he replied, locking his toolbox. "But it was a good one. Met nice people." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "You hungry? I was thinking of grabbing something before heading home. Maybe a burger from one of the food trucks?" He looked surprised, almost like he hadn't expected her to ask. "You sure? Don't you have work stuff to wrap up?" She grinned. "I can multitask. Besides, it's just dinner. You did fix my car, remember?" That made him laugh, the kind of quiet laugh that seemed rare for him. "All right then," he said. "Dinner sounds good." They sat at a picnic table near the end of the lot, sharing a meal under the soft glow of string lights. The world around them was filled with the sound of chatter and the hum of generators, but for the two of them, everything felt calm. Lena asked about his work, how he got into fixing cars, what he liked about it. He told her about how he'd started helping at his uncle's garage when he was 15, then eventually opened his own shop after saving up for years. He talked about it not like it was just a job, but something that gave him peace. She listened intently. There was something grounding about him, the way he spoke with honesty, never trying to impress, just sharing. At one point she asked, "Do you ever think of doing something else? Expanding or moving to the city?" He shook his head. "I like small places. Everyone knows everyone, and I like being the guy people come to when they're stuck. It feels good to fix things." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Lena found herself admiring that about him, the way he found meaning in ordinary things. When they finished eating, they sat quietly for a while, watching the lights fade as stalls began to close. She realized she hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time. There was no pretending, no trying to be impressive. It was just real. Before they said goodbye, she took out her phone. "You still refuse to take money, but I'm not letting you vanish again. Let me at least save your number, in case my car decides to test me again." He smiled, taking her phone and typing his number. "You can call any time, car trouble or not." She saved it under Ryan, the rainy day hero, which made him laugh. That night, as she drove home, she realized she was smiling the whole way. It had been a long day, but somehow it ended perfectly. Over the next few weeks, they started talking more often. At first, it was about car things, questions she pretended to have about maintenance just so she could text him. But soon the conversations turned more personal. They talked about their favorite movies, childhood memories, small regrets, and silly dreams. Sometimes he'd drop by her office parking lot to check her car, always refusing to charge anything. Other times, she'd stop by his garage with coffee or snacks, saying she was just passing by. But both of them knew it wasn't just coincidence anymore. Still, they kept it simple. No big confessions, no rush. Just two people slowly learning each other's rhythm. One afternoon, while helping a customer at work, Lena caught sight of Ryan through the window. He was standing near her car, waiting. When she went outside, he said, "Your left headlight's dim. Thought I'd fix it before it goes out completely." She smiled. You really don't like seeing me stranded, do you? Not my favorite sight, he said, smiling softly. There was a small pause, the kind that carries more meaning than words. From that day on, it became normal to see him around. Her co-workers teased her sometimes, saying, "Your mechanic's here again," but she didn't mind. She liked how natural it felt. Little by little, she started to see what kind of person he really was: humble, patient, and careful with words. He didn't talk about his problems, but she could sense he'd been through his share of struggles. Yet he carried himself with quiet strength, and Ryan, on his part, began to open up more too. He told her how his mother used to say, "You don't have to have much to be good. Just do what you can." Maybe that was why he helped her that day without thinking twice. Lena often thought about how rare it was to meet someone who didn't try to impress her, who simply showed up when it mattered. One evening, when she thanked him again for helping, he smiled and said, "You know, that day I stopped wasn't just about fixing a car. I think it fixed something in me too. I didn't realize how much I missed just connecting with someone for no reason at all." That stayed with her long after he left. She didn't know what would come next. Friendship, something more, or maybe just the comfort of knowing someone who made the world feel a little kinder. But one thing was certain: meeting him again wasn't just coincidence. It felt like life had quietly placed them in each other's path again. This time, not just to fix a car, but to start something neither of them had expected. And deep down, Lena knew this was only the beginning. Over the next few months, Lena and Ryan's friendship grew slowly, like something that didn't need to be rushed. It was easy, the kind of connection that didn't need constant words to feel real. She often stopped by his garage after work, sitting on an old wooden stool near the open door while he worked on cars. The sound of tools clicking and the faint smell of oil became oddly comforting to her. He wasn't much of a talker when he worked, but Lena didn't mind. Sometimes she just watched, sipping her coffee, asking small questions here and there. Other times they'd drive to the nearby diner for late lunches, sharing fries and laughing about small things. It all felt simple, almost too simple for a world that often complicated everything. Still, the more time they spent together, the more Lena started noticing the differences between their lives. She worked in a tall glass building downtown, surrounded by polished shoes, shiny desks, and endless talk about promotions. Ryan's world was smaller: a single-room garage, old posters on the walls, and a loyal list of customers who trusted him completely. One evening, after finishing a long day at the office, Lena invited him to a charity dinner her company was hosting. "You should come," she said, smiling. "It's not too formal, just a dinner and a small auction. They're raising funds for local repair shops, too. You'd fit right in." Ryan hesitated. "I don't know. Those things aren't really my scene." "You'll be fine," she said. "Besides, it'll be nice for you to meet some new people." He looked unsure, but finally agreed. "All right, but don't blame me if I spill something on the tablecloth." She laughed. "Deal." When the night came, Lena wore a simple black dress and stood by the entrance, waiting. Ryan showed up exactly on time, wearing a plain button-down shirt and a dark jacket. He looked neat but a little uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. "You look great," she said. He gave a nervous smile. "You too. But I feel like everyone's staring." "Relax," she whispered. "They're just jealous you fix cars better than they fix their hair." That made him laugh, easing the tension. Inside, the hall was full of well-dressed guests, soft music, and polished conversation. Lena introduced Ryan to her co-workers, who smiled politely, but exchanged quick glances when he mentioned his garage. He noticed it too, the subtle tone in their voices, the way they asked questions that sounded polite but felt distant. Later, when Lena stepped away to talk with a client, Ryan stood near the corner of the room, holding a glass of water, watching the crowd. He felt out of place. He wasn't angry, just quietly aware that this wasn't his world. When she returned, she noticed the look in his eyes. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, just a little tired. Think I'll head out soon." She frowned. "Already? I'm glad you invited me," he said softly, "but I think I'll skip the rest. These kinds of places aren't really for me." She wanted to argue but didn't. She could tell he meant it. "All right," she said gently. "Thanks for coming anyway." He smiled. "Wouldn't have missed it. Drive safe, okay?" As he left, she felt a strange ache in her chest. It wasn't disappointment, they're more like realizing there were invisible lines between their worlds. Lines that neither of them had drawn but were there all the same. The next few days, Ryan didn't stop by her office like he usually did. She texted once asking if he was okay, and he replied quickly, "Just busy at work. Catch up soon." But something felt different in his tone. When she finally visited his garage the next week, she found him working on an old van, focused, almost avoiding eye contact. "You've been hiding," she said lightly. He chuckled but didn't look up. "Just trying to get through a few tough jobs." "Ryan," she said softly, leaning on the hood of the car. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me." He put down his wrench, wiping his hands with a rag. "It's nothing. I just felt out of place the other night. That's all," she sighed. "You didn't have to feel that way." "You were fine," he shook his head. "I wasn't. You belong in that world, the nice clothes, the fancy talk, all of it. I don't. I fix cars, Lena, that's what I do. And I'm proud of it, but I know how people look at me. You think I care about that?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He met her eyes, calm but honest. "Not you. But they do. And I could see it. I don't want to be the reason you feel embarrassed in front of your people." She stepped closer. "You're not even for a second." He smiled faintly, that quiet smile she had seen many times before. "You say that now, but one day, you'll realize we come from two different directions. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I don't care." His words sank deep. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain tapping on the tin roof filled the silence. The same kind of rain that had brought them together in the first place. "Finally," Lena whispered, "you're pushing me away for something that doesn't even matter." He looked at her, his voice low. "It matters to me." After that day, they didn't talk as much. Not because they were angry, but because they didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence grows not from dislike, but from confusion. When feelings become bigger than words, Lena tried to focus on work. But she missed the sound of his laugh, the calmness he carried, and the way he listened like her words actually mattered. Her friends noticed she was quieter lately, though she brushed it off. One evening, she passed by his garage after work. The lights were off, but his truck was parked outside. She almost stopped, but something in her hesitated. Maybe he needed space. Maybe she did too. Weeks went by. She buried herself in work, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, she knew something was missing. That easy comfort she'd found with him, that rare kind of peace. Then one morning, her car refused to start again. She sat there, staring at the dashboard, half laughing at the irony. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Her first instinct was to call him, but she stopped herself. Maybe it was better not to. Maybe it was time to learn how to manage things on her own again. But as she sat there, a part of her wished he would somehow just show up, like before, out of nowhere, with that calm look in his eyes. She ended up calling a tow truck instead. The mechanic who came couldn't fix it on the spot, so he towed it to a nearby shop. Not Ryan's, just another one closer to her office. The man who inspected the car told her it was an electrical issue. "Probably been building up for weeks," he said. That night, when she finally got home, she sat by the window and thought about everything that had changed. She missed him, not just because he had helped her before, but because of how he made her feel, like she didn't have to prove herself all the time. With him, she could just be. And even though they hadn't spoken in weeks, she couldn't shake the feeling that he missed her too. What she didn't know was that Ryan had thought about her every single day since that dinner. He tried to convince himself that stepping back was the right thing to do. She deserved someone who fit her world better, someone who could walk into those rooms without feeling like a stranger. But every time he saw a car like hers drive by, he found himself turning his head, hoping it was her. One late afternoon, while closing his garage, he picked up his phone, thumb hovering over her name in his contact list. He typed a message, then deleted it. Then typed again. Finally, he sent it. "Hope your car's still running fine. Just thought I'd check in." When her phone buzzed, Lena's heart skipped a beat. She read the message twice before replying. "It's been giving me trouble again. Maybe it misses you fixing it." He smiled at the screen, shaking his head. "Or maybe it just wants an excuse to see me again." She wrote back quickly. "Maybe it's not the only one." That was the first real smile either of them had in weeks. They didn't meet that night, but something had quietly shifted between them. The silence had broken. Both of them still carried doubts. About timing, about belonging, about whether their worlds could truly blend. But what neither of them could deny was how real it all felt, even in its uncertainty. Sometimes, life has a way of testing people, not through fights or anger, but through distance and doubt. And for Lena and Ryan, that test had just begun. The weeks that followed were quiet but not empty. The short messages between Lena and Ryan slowly turned into longer ones. At first, they only talked about small things, how work was going, how the weather seemed confused lately, or how the town felt quieter than usual. But soon their conversations found warmth again. They didn't mention what had happened at the dinner or the distance that had grown between them. It was as if both knew there was no need to reopen old wounds. Still, they hadn't seen each other in person since that last time at his garage. Life, as it often does, kept pulling them in different directions. She was busy planning a big corporate event, and he was swamped with repair jobs before the upcoming holiday season. One rainy evening, Lena was driving home from work after staying late at the office. The sky was dark and heavy and the wind had picked up. The roads glistened under the streetlights, slick and uneven from the rain. Her windshield wipers moved back and forth, fighting the water that seemed endless. She turned on the radio to fill the silence, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about Ryan, how she had missed seeing him face to face, how his voice always seemed calmer than the rest of the world. She wondered if he ever thought about her too. The thought made her smile faintly, even as she kept her eyes on the road. But just a few miles from home, her car began to sputter. It was the same unmistakable sound and that coughing, stalling noise that always came right before the engine died. "Oh no," she muttered, trying to stay calm. She pressed the accelerator lightly, but the car refused to move. It rolled to a slow stop on the side of the road, right under a flickering streetlight. The rain grew heavier, and the sound of thunder rolled across the sky. Lena sighed, leaning back in her seat. "Not again," she whispered, rubbing her temples. She tried restarting the engine twice, but it wouldn't respond. The dashboard lights flickered and then went dark. Her phone was low on battery again, a cruel coincidence she couldn't help but laugh at. For a moment she sat there in the dim light, thinking how strangely familiar this felt. Just like that first day when he had appeared out of nowhere, out of habit. Her fingers hovered over his contact name. She didn't want to bother him, especially this late. But the rain wasn't stopping and the road was nearly empty. Before she could decide, a pair of headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. The truck slowed down and pulled over a few feet behind her. Her heart jumped, and when she saw the door open and a familiar figure step out, she almost couldn't believe it. Ryan. He walked toward her, the rain hitting his jacket hard, his hair already soaked. She rolled down the window, half laughing, half in shock. "You again?" she said, her voice trembling between relief and disbelief. He smiled, water dripping from his face. "Looks like your car missed me too." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You've got perfect timing. Or maybe terrible timing," he said. "This weather's no joke." He grabbed his toolbox from the truck and got to work without another word. The rain poured harder, but he didn't seem to care. His hands moved confidently, checking wires, opening panels, brushing off water. It was just like before, quiet, steady, reassuring. Lena stepped out with her umbrella, trying to shield him from the downpour. "You don't have to stand in the rain," she said. He smiled up at her. "You said that last time too." Didn't help then either. She rolled her eyes, holding the umbrella closer to him anyway. "At least let me try." Minutes passed in silence except for the soft sound of rain and the hum of passing cars. Finally, Ryan stepped back. "Try it now." She got in, turned the key, and like a miracle, the engine roared back to life. She let out a sigh of relief. "You did it again." He leaned down by the window. "Just a loose wire. You're lucky it didn't shut off earlier." She looked up at him through the open window, her heart swelling. "Lucky seems to happen when you're around." He smiled, eyes soft. "Guess I'm just meant to keep your car alive." She shook her head. "No, you're meant to keep me from losing my mind." He laughed quietly, looking down for a second, and then said, "Get inside. You'll catch a cold standing out here. Only if you promise to let me buy you a coffee after this," she said quickly. He paused, surprised. "Now?" "Yes, now," she said. There's a small cafe down the road that's still open. You can't just fix my car and drive off again like last time." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Coffee sounds good." They drove to the cafe together, his truck following close behind her car. The place was nearly empty when they arrived. Warm yellow light glowed from the windows and the smell of coffee filled the air. They took a booth by the window. Rain streaked down the glass as they sat across from each other, 2 cups of steaming coffee between them. "It's strange," Lena said softly. "Every time my car breaks down, you show up like some kind of guardian." He smiled. "I guess the universe just wants to make sure we don't drift too far apart." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever think about that night at the dinner?" "About what you said?" He nodded slowly. "Every day. Then why didn't you come back?" He looked down at his cup. "Because I didn't want to make things harder for you. You have your world, and I have mine. I didn't think they could fit together." She reached across the table, gently touching his hand. "Maybe they're not that different. Maybe you just think they are?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. "People like me don't fit easily into fancy rooms." "And people like me," she said softly, "don't care about fancy rooms. I just want people who make life real." The words hung between them for a while. He didn't reply right away, but the look in his eyes said enough. Outside, the rain began to slow, turning into a soft drizzle. The cafe lights flickered slightly and soft music played in the background. It felt peaceful, the kind of peace that came when the truth was finally out in the open. After a long silence, Ryan said quietly, "You know what I thought when I saw your car tonight?" "What?" "I thought, maybe life's giving me a second chance. Maybe I shouldn't walk away this time." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then don't." For a long time they just sat there, no grand gestures, no dramatic words, just a quiet understanding. The kind that doesn't need promises to feel real. When they finally left the cafe, the rain had stopped completely. The night air was cool and fresh. Ryan walked her to her car, just like before. As she opened the door, he gently helped her in, the same way he had the first time they met. But this time, when she looked at him, she didn't just see the man who had fixed her car. She saw the man who had shown her what kindness looked like when the world forgot it. The man who didn't speak much but somehow said everything that mattered. Their eyes met, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked softly. "For finding me again." He smiled. "Maybe I never really lost you." She started the car, the engine humming smoothly. He stood there as she pulled away, his reflection fading in the side mirror. But this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something beginning all over again, only stronger. As she drove home, Lena couldn't stop smiling. The same road that once made her feel helpless now felt different, like it had led her exactly where she needed to be. That night, when she finally lay in bed, she replayed every moment in her head. The rain, the cafe, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. And for the first time in a long while, she fell asleep knowing she wasn't alone anymore. Because sometimes, love doesn't start with a perfect moment. It starts with small, ordinary acts of care, like someone stopping in the rain to help you into your car and unknowingly, into something far deeper. The morning after that rainy night felt different. The air was lighter, the city quieter, as if the world had slowed down a little. Lena woke up early, long before her alarm rang, still thinking about Ryan. She couldn't stop replaying the way he looked at her when he helped her into the car. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was simple yet filled with something honest. She made coffee, sat by her window, and watched the streets slowly come to life. Cars passed by, people hurried to work, but she stayed still, smiling to herself. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't worried about anything. Not about work or expectations or what people might think. She just felt peaceful. That morning, she sent Ryan a message. "Good morning. Thank you again for last night. Coffee's on me next time." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. His reply was short but full of warmth. "Good morning. You owe me more than coffee by now, but I'll take it." She laughed quietly to herself. That small exchange felt like sunlight on a cold day. In the days that followed, they started meeting more often. Sometimes after her office hours, she'd drive to his workshop, bringing him sandwiches or coffee. He would wipe his hands on an old rag, smile, and they'd sit together on the wooden bench outside while the sun went down. Other times, he'd stop by her office just to check if her car was running fine. The people at work started noticing, whispering and teasing her gently. But this time, Lena didn't hide her smile. It wasn't about showing off or proving anything. She just liked being around him. There was something about his quiet way of caring that made everything else feel less complicated. One evening, as they sat outside his garage watching the sky turn orange, she said softly, "You know, I used to think love had to look perfect. Big gestures, fancy dinners, all that. But now I think it's more about the small things, like sitting here sharing silence." Ryan smiled, keeping his eyes on the sunset. "Perfect's overrated," he said. "It's the simple stuff that lasts." She turned to him. "Do you really believe that?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, the world moves too fast. People forget how to stay." His words stayed with her. Their bond grew naturally, without force. There were no dramatic confessions, no sudden changes. Just steady days filled with warmth and small moments that quietly built a story. One Friday evening, she invited him to dinner at her apartment. It was the first time he'd been there. She had cleaned every corner, cooked her favorite meal, and even lit a candle on the table. When he arrived, he looked slightly nervous, holding a small bunch of wildflowers he must have picked on his way. "These are for you," he said, looking a little shy. She smiled, taking them. "They're beautiful." "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he said simply. The evening went by softly. Laughter, stories, gentle teasing. When they finished eating, they sat on the couch with mugs of tea. The city lights flickered outside her window and soft music played in the background. "You know what's funny?" she said, leaning back. "I used to think that night when my car broke down was the worst day of my life. But it turned out to be the best one." He chuckled. "That's usually how life works. The best things don't announce themselves." She looked at him quietly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day?" "I don't," he said, "because I did." His words were so simple, yet they held something deep, something that didn't need to be explained. A few months passed. They kept growing closer, learning each other's ways. She discovered he loved old songs and fixed things even when they didn't need fixing. He found out she always hummed when she cooked and cried during happy movie endings. They became part of each other's routines, not out of habit, but because it felt right. One evening, Lena's car finally gave up for good. The engine had been repaired too many times, and this time it wasn't worth saving. Ryan helped her tow it back to his garage. She stood beside the car, looking a little emotional. "This old thing brought me to you," she said softly. He smiled. "Then maybe it deserves a proper goodbye." They both laughed. Instead of fixing it again, Ryan suggested she sell it and get something new. She agreed, though a small part of her didn't want to let go. That car had carried too many memories. The rain, the roadside, their first meeting. When the new car finally arrived, he helped her set it up, making sure everything worked perfectly. As he tightened the last bolt, she said quietly, "You really can't help yourself, can you? Always fixing things." He looked up at her and said, "Not everything needs fixing. Some things just need someone to care enough." Her heart softened at his words. Later that evening, after dropping him home, Lena sat in her car for a while before driving off. She looked at the empty seat beside her and smiled. She realized something. It wasn't the car that had changed her life. It was the person who appeared when everything had gone wrong and showed her what real kindness looked like. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how far they had come, from strangers on a rainy road to two people who had quietly built something lasting. The next morning, she drove to his workshop again, but this time she didn't bring sandwiches or coffee. She brought a small envelope. Inside it was a simple hand-drawn picture, her old car parked under the rain with a man standing beside it holding an umbrella. At the bottom she had written, "This is where everything began. Thank you for stopping." When she handed it to him, he looked at it for a long moment, then smiled softly. "You kept this memory alive," she nodded. "Some things are worth keeping." He placed the drawing on his desk carefully, like something precious. Then he said quietly, "You know, every time I helped you into that car, I thought I was just doing what anyone would do. But now I realize it wasn't about the car at all." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, eyes gentle. "I wasn't helping you into your car. I was helping myself into your life." For a moment she couldn't say anything. Her throat felt tight, her eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. She smiled through them and said, "Then I'm glad you did." From that day on, there was no uncertainty left between them. They didn't need to label what they had or explain it to anyone. It was simple. Two people who had found each other when they least expected to, and who kept choosing each other every day. Seasons changed. The rain came and went, flowers bloomed and faded, but their connection stayed the same, steady, gentle and real. Sometimes when they drove together, Lena would look out the window and remember that first rainy afternoon. She would glance at Ryan, his hand steady on the steering wheel, and feel that same warmth she had felt years ago. One evening, as they were driving home, the rain started again, soft at first, then heavier. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, and the world outside blurred into shades of silver and gray. She looked at him and smiled. "You know, it's raining again," he grinned. "I noticed. You want me to pull over and fix something?" She laughed. "No, just drive. I like it when it rains." And as they drove through the same kind of weather that had first brought them together, it felt like life had come full circle. Only this time there was no broken car, no fear, no loneliness, and just two people who had found their way home. Years later, whenever Lena told their story to friends or family, she always smiled when she reached the part about that first meeting. She would say, "He didn't come with flowers or fancy words. He just showed up when I needed help," and somehow, that moment turned into a lifetime. And Ryan, sitting beside her, would always laugh and say, "All I did was fix a car." But she knew better, because sometimes love doesn't start with fireworks or fairy tales. Sometimes it begins quietly, with someone stopping in the rain, lending a hand and helping you into the car without knowing they're also helping you into the rest of your life.